The night air bit cold as David pulled his worn jacket tighter around his shoulders. He sat with his back against the brick wall of a convenience store, watching people come and go. Most didn't even glance his way. Those who did quickly looked away, pretending they hadn't seen him at all. 8 months. That's how long it had been since David had a real home. 8 months since his life fell apart like a house of cards in a strong wind. He still remembered the day clearly. The accident at the construction site. The way his knee buckled under the weight of falling debris. The hospital bills that piled up faster than he could count them. His landlord hadn't cared about the injury or the medical expenses. Rent was due and David didn't have it. 3 months later, he was out on the street with nothing but a backpack and a sleeping bag that smelled of mildew. Tonight felt colder than usual. Or maybe David was just getting tired. Tired of everything. The cardboard sign next to him read, "Anything helps, God bless," in faded marker. He'd written it weeks ago, back when he still had hope that things might change. A young couple walked past, the woman clutching her purse a little tighter. David didn't blame her. He knew what he looked like now. His beard had grown scraggly, his clothes were stained, and he probably didn't smell great either. When you're living on the street, basic things like showers become luxury items you can't afford. The store's fluorescent lights hummed above him. Through the window he could see the clerk watching him, probably wondering if he should call the police. David had been moved along from enough spots to know the look. But it was getting late and most business owners didn't bother anymore once the sun went down. His stomach growled. He'd had half a sandwich earlier that someone left on a bench. That was hours ago. David tried not to think about food. But it was hard when people kept walking by with bags from restaurants, the smell of fresh pizza or burgers drifting past him. Then he heard the sound of a motorcycle pulling up. The engine was deep and throaty, the kind of bike that cost more than David used to make in a year. He didn't look up. Rich people on expensive bikes didn't usually stop to help guys like him. The engine cut off. David heard footsteps, boots on pavement coming closer. Still, he kept his eyes down. You learned quick on the street that making eye contact could sometimes cause problems. The boots stopped right in front of him, black leather, well-worn but expensive looking. David's eyes traveled up slowly. Dark jeans, a simple black jacket, and then a motorcycle helmet being pulled off. The face that emerged made David's heart skip. He blinked, certain he was seeing things. Maybe the cold was finally getting to him, making him hallucinate. But no, the face remained the same. It was Keanu Reeves. The actual Keanu Reeves, standing right there in front of him like it was the most normal thing in the world. David had seen his movies dozens of times. Back when he had an apartment and a TV, he'd watch the John Wick films over and over. They were good escape, those movies. Now one of the stars was standing in front of him in real life. "Hey," Keanu said, his voice quiet and friendly. "How are you doing tonight?" David's mouth opened, but no words came out. Was this really happening? He glanced around, expecting to see cameras, a film crew, something that would explain why a Hollywood actor was talking to him. But there was nothing, just regular people walking by, most too absorbed in their phones to notice. "I'm okay," David finally managed, though his voice came out rough from not talking much all day. Keanu tilted his head slightly, a small smile on his face, but his eyes looked serious.
"Have you eaten today?"
The question was so simple, so direct, that David didn't know how to respond at first. People usually asked, "How'd you end up here?" Or, "Why don't you get a job?" Somebody just asked if he'd eaten. "I had something earlier," David said, not wanting to sound like he was begging. Keanu nodded slowly, then did something completely unexpected. He looked down at the cold pavement, seemed to consider it for a moment, then sat down right next to David. Just sat down on the dirty sidewalk in his nice jeans like it was a park bench. David stared at him in disbelief. A few people walking by did double takes, their phones suddenly coming up to take pictures from a distance. But Keanu didn't seem to notice or care. "I'm Keanu," he said, extending his hand. David shook it, feeling completely surreal. "I'm David, I know who you are. I mean, I've seen your movies." "Thanks, man," Keanu said with a genuine smile. "What's your story, David? If you don't mind me asking." And there it was, that question again. But somehow, coming from Keanu, sitting there on the cold ground beside him, it didn't feel invasive or judgmental. It felt like someone actually cared about the answer. David found himself talking. He told Keanu about the construction job, the accident, The knee that never healed right. He talked about the medical bills, the eviction, the way everything spiraled so fast he couldn't catch his breath. He mentioned his daughter, how she was 13 now and living with her mom in another state. How he hadn't talked to her in almost a year because he was too ashamed of what he'd become. Keanu listened to all of it. Really listened. He didn't check his phone, didn't look around distractedly, didn't interrupt with advice or judgment. He just sat there, nodding occasionally, his eyes focused completely on David. More people were noticing now. A small crowd had started to gather at a respectful distance, phones out, murmuring to each other. But Keanu seemed completely unbothered by the attention. "I lost my best friend when I was young," Keanu said after David finished talking. "Lost my daughter too before she was even born. Life can be brutal sometimes. It takes things from us that we can never get back." David felt a lump form in his throat. He'd heard some of these stories before, read about them in magazines back when he could afford such things. But hearing Keanu talk about loss while sitting next to him on a cold sidewalk made it feel different. Real. "The thing is," Keanu continued, "we're all one or two bad breaks away from being exactly where you are. People don't want to believe that, but it's true. You're not here because you're weak or because you failed. You're here because life threw you a curve you couldn't hit." Those words hit David harder than he expected. Nobody had said anything like that to him in months. Everyone else seemed to think he'd made bad choices, that he was lazy, that he deserved his situation somehow. Keanu reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to David, who took it with shaking fingers. "Call this number tomorrow morning," Keanu said. 9 o'clock. Someone will answer and they'll help you. Can you do that for me?" David looked at the card. It had a phone number and nothing else. "Is this real?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Keanu stood up, brushing off his jeans. He put his hand on David's shoulder and squeezed gently. "It's real. I promise you. Make the call, David. Things can get better, but you have to take that first step." Then Keanu put his helmet back on, got on his motorcycle, and rode off into the night. David sat there holding the card, watching the tail light disappear down the street. Around him, the small crowd was already dispersing, everyone checking their phones to see if they'd gotten good pictures. David looked down at the card in his hand. Could this be real? Could his luck finally be changing? He tucked the card carefully into his jacket's inner pocket, right against his chest where he wouldn't lose it. For the first time in 8 months, David felt something he'd almost forgotten existed. He felt hope. David didn't sleep much that night. He kept reaching into his jacket to make sure the card was still there, afraid it might disappear like something from a dream. Every time his fingers touched the smooth cardboard, his heart would skip a beat. He found a spot under an overpass where he usually slept, rolled out his sleeping bag and lay there staring up at the concrete ceiling. Cars rumbled overhead, their headlights creating strange shadows that danced across the walls. Was it real? Had Keanu Reeves really sat down next to him on that sidewalk? Had he really been given a card with a promise of help? David played the conversation over and over in his mind, searching for any sign that it had been a prank or a misunderstanding. But no, it had been real. The way Keanu had looked at him, talked to him like he was a person worth knowing. That couldn't be faked. David had been invisible for so long that he'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen. The night dragged on. David watched the sky slowly lighten from black to deep blue to pale gray. He gave up trying to sleep around 5 in the morning and just lay there waiting. The card said to call at 9 o'clock. That felt like a lifetime away. At 7, David packed up his sleeping bag and started walking. He needed to find a phone, and he needed to find one before 9. His own phone had died months ago, the service cut off when he couldn't pay the bill. Since then, he'd relied on public phones when he needed to make calls, which wasn't often. He walked through the quiet morning streets, past closed shops and early morning joggers who gave him wide berths. The sun was coming up now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. On another day, David might have appreciated the beauty. Today, all he could think about was that phone call. There was a library that opened at 8. David knew because he'd spent time there before, using the bathrooms to wash up, sometimes reading magazines just to feel normal for a few hours. The librarians were kind there, never made him feel unwelcome even though they knew he was homeless. He waited on the steps, watching people start their day. A man in a suit rushed past, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. A woman pushed a stroller, talking softly to the baby inside. Normal people living normal lives. David wondered if he'd ever have that again. At 8 sharp, the doors unlocked. David went straight to the public phone in the lobby. It took quarters, and he had exactly 3 of them. Money he'd been saving for emergencies. This qualified as an emergency. He pulled out the card with trembling fingers. The number stared back at him. Simple black digits on white cardboard. What if no one answered? What if it was all a mistake? What if Keanu had been just being nice, never expecting David to actually call? David's finger hovered over the buttons. 8:45. Too early. The card had said 9 o'clock. He didn't want to seem desperate. Didn't want to mess this up by calling at the wrong time. He spent the next 15 minutes pacing in front of the phone, watching the clock on the wall tick forward with agonizing slowness. Other people came and went, giving him curious glances but saying nothing. The librarian at the front desk, an older woman named Helen, who'd always been nice to him, smiled encouragingly. At exactly 9 o'clock, David picked up the phone, dropped in his quarters, and dialed the number. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello, this is Community Bridge Services. Jennifer speaking. How can I help you? David's mouth went dry. Hi. My name is David. I was told to call this number. Keanu gave me a card and said to call at 9. There was a brief pause, then the woman's voice became warm and excited. David, yes, we've been expecting your call. Keanu told us about you. I'm so glad you called. How are you doing this morning? Something about her voice, the genuine care in it, made David's eyes sting with tears. I'm okay. I'm at the library downtown. Perfect, Jennifer said. David, I want you to listen carefully. We're going to help you, okay? This is what we do. We help people get back on their feet. Can you come to our office today? I don't have money for a bus, David admitted, his face flushing with shame even though she couldn't see him. That's okay. Give me the address of where you are, and I'll arrange a ride for you. We'll take care of everything. David gave her the library's address, still half convinced this was too good to be true. Jennifer told him a driver would be there in 30 minutes and he should look for a blue sedan. She gave him her direct number and told him to call if he had any problems. When he hung up, David just stood there holding the phone, staring at nothing. Helen, the librarian, approached him gently. Good news? She asked. I think so, David said, his voice cracking. I really think so. The 30 minutes felt like hours. David went to the bathroom and did his best to clean up. He washed his face and hands, tried to smooth down his hair. Wished he had clean clothes to change into. He wanted to make a good impression, wanted them to see that he was worth helping. At 9:35, a blue sedan pulled up in front of the library. David watched through the window as the driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, got out and looked around. David grabbed his backpack, the one that held everything he owned, and headed outside. David? The driver asked. That's me. I'm Robert. Jennifer sent me to pick you up. You ready to go? During the drive, Robert didn't ask invasive questions. He talked about the weather, about traffic, about the basketball game last night. Normal conversation, like David was a normal person. It felt wonderful. They drove to a part of the city David didn't know well, pulling up in front of a modest building with a sign that read, Community Bridge Services. It didn't look fancy or intimidating. It looked welcoming. Jennifer met him at the door. She was younger than David expected, maybe in her 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and a smile that reached her eyes. David, she said, shaking his hand firmly. It's so good to meet you. Come on in. We have a lot to talk about. She led him to a small office with comfortable chairs and a desk covered in neat stacks of paper. On the wall were photos of people, dozens of them, smiling faces with little captions underneath. Success stories, David realized. People who'd been helped. First things first, Jennifer said, sitting down across from him. I want you to know that everything we discuss here is confidential. This is a safe space. You're not being judged, you're not being investigated. We're just here to help. Does that make sense? David nodded, not trusting his voice. Good. Now, Keanu told me a little bit about your situation. The injury, the housing issues. But I want to hear it from you. Tell me your story, David. Start wherever you want. So David told her everything. The whole story, from the beginning. The accident, the hospital, the bills, the eviction. He told her about his daughter, about the shame he felt. about the nights when he wondered if things would ever get better. He talked for almost an hour, and Jennifer listened to all of it, taking occasional notes but mostly just paying attention. When he finished, she set down her pen and looked at him directly. "Here's what's going to happen," she said. "First, we're going to get you into temporary housing today. Not a shelter, an actual apartment in one of our transitional living facilities. You'll have your own room, your own space. Is that okay with you?" David couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears streaming down his face now, not caring anymore about looking weak. "Second, we're going to schedule you for a full medical evaluation. Your knee needs to be looked at properly, and we need to see what other health issues need addressing. We have doctors we work with who volunteer their time," she continued, ticking items off on her fingers. "Third, we're going to help you apply for disability benefits. It sounds like you should have been receiving them all along. Fourth, we're going to get you connected with a job training program. Even if your knee doesn't allow construction work anymore, there are other things you can do. And fifth, we're going to help you reconnect with your daughter if that's something you want." David wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I want that more than anything." "Then we'll make it happen," Jennifer said simply. "David, I need you to understand something. This isn't charity. This is community. Keanu funds this organization because he believes everyone deserves a second chance. He doesn't do it for publicity or tax breaks. He does it because he genuinely cares. And so do we." "Why me?" David asked. "Why did he stop for me?" Jennifer smiled. "Why not you? You think you're not worth helping? You think your life doesn't matter? Because I'm here to tell you it does. You matter, David. Your story matters. And what happens next, that matters too." She stood up and gestured for him to follow. "Come on, let's get you set up in your new place. You must be exhausted." As they walked out of the office, David noticed one of the photos on the wall, a man about his age smiling broadly, holding keys to an apartment. The caption read, "Michael, 6 months sober, new job, new life." Could that be him someday? Could he be one of those success stories? Jennifer noticed him looking. "That could be you in a few months," she said, as if reading his mind. "If you're willing to do the work, we're willing to walk beside you every step of the way." David looked at the photo one more time, then followed Jennifer out into the sunshine. For the first time in 8 months, he wasn't just surviving. He was actually living. The apartment was small, but to David it felt like a palace. One room with a bed, a desk, a small kitchenette, and his own bathroom. His own bathroom. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, just staring at everything, afraid that if he blinked it might disappear. "It's not much," Jennifer said apologetically. "But it's clean and it's safe. You'll share the building with other people in the program. There's a common area downstairs, laundry facilities, and a counselor on site if you need to talk to someone." "It's perfect," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. Jennifer handed him a set of keys. "These are yours. Your space, your privacy. There are some basic rules. No drugs, no alcohol, quiet hours after 10. But mostly this is your home for as long as you need it while you get back on your feet." After Jennifer left, David sat on the edge of the bed and just breathed. The mattress was firm, the sheets were clean, and there was an actual pillow. He couldn't remember the last time he'd slept on a real bed. He took a shower that lasted almost 30 minutes, standing under the hot water until his skin turned pink. He washed away 8 months of street dirt, 8 months of shame, 8 months of feeling less than human. When he finally stepped out, he caught his reflection in the mirror. He barely recognized himself. That first night in the apartment, David slept for 14 hours straight. No cars rumbling overhead. No fear of someone stealing his things, no waking up every hour to make sure he was safe. Just deep, dreamless sleep. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Jennifer had been serious about helping him with everything. The medical evaluation happened within 3 days. A kind doctor named Dr. Martinez examined his knee, took x-rays, and explained that while the damage was permanent, physical therapy could improve his mobility significantly. "You'll probably never do heavy construction work again," Dr. Martinez said gently, "but that doesn't mean you can't work. We just need to find the right fit for you." The physical therapy sessions were hard. Some days David's knee hurt so much he wanted to quit, but the therapist, a woman named Patricia who'd worked with injured athletes, pushed him just enough without breaking him. "Pain is your body talking to you," she'd say. "We need to listen, but we also need to show it who's boss." Jennifer helped him apply for disability benefits. navigating the complicated paperwork that had overwhelmed David before. She also connected him with a lawyer who volunteered with the organization. The lawyer, Mr. Johnson, looked over David's case and shook his head. "You should have been receiving benefits all along," he said. "This injury clearly qualifies. We'll get this sorted out." But the thing that meant the most to David was the help reconnecting with his daughter. Her name was Lily, and she'd just turned 14. David had missed her 13th birthday, missed the start of high school, missed so much of her life. Jennifer sat with him one afternoon in her office. "We need to approach this carefully," she said. "Your ex-wife needs to be comfortable with the contact, and Lily needs to be ready. We don't want to push too hard too fast." With Jennifer's help, David wrote a letter to his daughter. He wrote it and rewrote it a dozen times, struggling to find the right words. How do you explain to your child why you disappeared? How do you apologize for abandoning them? The final letter was simple and honest. He told Lily he loved her. He explained what happened, not making excuses but helping her understand. He told her about getting help, about the apartment, about how he was working to become the father she deserved again. And he left the ball in her court. If she wanted to talk, he would be there. If she needed more time, he would wait. Mailing that letter was one of the hardest things David had ever done. What if she didn't write back? What if she hated him? What if he'd lost her forever? 3 weeks later, a letter arrived at the community bridge office addressed to him. Jennifer brought it to him personally. Her face lit up with a knowing smile. David's hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a single page in teenage handwriting, the letters large and looping. "Dear Dad," it began. "I got your letter. Mom and I talked about it a lot. I'm not going to lie, I was really mad at you for a long time. I didn't understand why you just disappeared. But Mom explained some stuff, and your letter helped too. I'm glad you're getting help. I'm glad you're okay. Maybe we could talk on the phone sometime, if you want to. Love, Lily. P.S. I'm in 9th grade now, and I made the volleyball team." David read the letter 5 times, tears rolling down his face. She didn't hate him. She was willing to talk. He had a chance. That phone call happened 2 days later. Jennifer let him use the office phone, giving him privacy by stepping out of the room. David's fingers shook as he dialed the number Lily had included in her letter. A teenage voice answered. "Hello, Lily. It's Dad." There was a pause, then a small sound that might have been a laugh or a sob or both. "Hi, Dad." They talked for an hour. It was awkward at first, full of long pauses and careful words. But slowly they found their rhythm. Lily told him about school, about volleyball, about her friends and teachers and the boy she maybe liked but wasn't sure. David told her about the program, about his apartment, about the physical therapy and the job training he was starting soon. "Are you really getting better?" Lily asked, her voice small and vulnerable in a way that broke David's heart. "I really am," he promised. "I'm not perfect and I still have a long way to go. But I'm trying, Lily, I'm really trying. That's all I wanted," she said quietly. "Just for you to try." Around this time, something else happened that David hadn't expected. Keanu showed up again. It was a Tuesday afternoon and David was in the common area of his building, reading a book about computer programming that Jennifer had given him. She thought he might be good at it, said his attention to detail would serve him well. Someone knocked on the open door. David looked up and nearly dropped his book. Keanu stood there in jeans and a t-shirt, looking exactly like he had that night outside the convenience store. No fancy clothes, no entourage, just him. "Hey, David," he said with that same easy smile. "Mind if I come in?" "Of course not," David stammered, standing up quickly. "Please, sit down." "Can I get you something?" "I don't have much, but I have water and I think there's some coffee." Keanu waved off the offer and sat in one of the worn chairs. "I'm good, thanks. I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. Jennifer told me you're making great progress." They talked for over an hour. Keanu asked about the physical therapy, about the job training, about Lily. He listened with the same complete attention he'd shown that first night, like David was the only person in the world who mattered in that moment. "The thing that impresses me most," Keanu said, "is that you made the call. You could have thrown away that card, convinced yourself it was too good to be true, but you showed up. That takes courage." "I was terrified," David admitted. "That's what courage is," Keanu said. "Being terrified and doing it anyway." David had been wanting to ask something since Keanu arrived, but he wasn't sure how. Finally, he just came out with it. Why do you do this? The funding, the organization, checking in on people like me. You could just write a check and forget about it. Why do you actually care? Keanu was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the city beyond. When he spoke, his voice was soft but clear. Because I've been lucky in my life, but I've also known loss. Real loss. And I learned that money and fame don't protect you from pain. What matters is connection. Human connection. Helping each other. He looked back at David. I don't do this because I think I'm some kind of hero. I do it because we're all in this together, you know? Your struggle is my struggle. Your success is my success. Before Keanu left, he pulled something from his pocket. It was another business card, but this one had his personal email on it. If you ever need anything or if you just want to talk, reach out. I mean that, David. You're not alone anymore. After Keanu left, David sat holding that card, thinking about everything that had changed in just a few weeks. He had a home. He had hope. He was talking to his daughter again. He was on a path to something better. That night, David started a journal. Jennifer had suggested it as a way to process everything he'd been through. On the first page, he wrote, "Today I learned that miracles are real. They just look different than you expect. Sometimes they look like a movie star sitting on a cold sidewalk. Sometimes they look like a phone call that changes your life. Sometimes they look like a letter from your daughter that says she still loves you." He paused, pen hovering over the paper, then added one more line. "I'm not the same person I was 8 months ago. I'm not even the same person I was a month ago. I'm becoming someone new, someone better, and for the first time in a long time, I can't wait to see who that person is going to be." 6 months after that night outside the convenience store, David's life looked completely different. He woke up in his apartment every morning, made coffee in his small kitchenette, and got ready for his day like millions of other people. The normalcy of it still amazed him sometimes. The computer training program had been challenging at first. David had basic skills from years ago, but technology had moved forward while his life had fallen apart. But he discovered something about himself during those classes. He was good at this, really good. His instructor, an energetic guy named Chris who taught at the community college, pulled him aside after class one day. "David, I've been teaching this course for 5 years. And I can count on one hand the students who pick things up as fast as you do. Have you thought about what comes next?" "I'm just trying to finish the program," David said honestly. "No, I mean after. You could do this professionally. Web development, maybe database management. Companies are desperate for people with these skills." Chris handed him a folder. "These are some entry-level positions I think you'd be qualified for. Just think about it." David took the folder home and spread the job listings across his desk. Most required experience he didn't have, but a few were marked "willing to train the right candidate." Those words gave him hope. With Jennifer's help, he put together a resume. It wasn't easy. There was a big gap where the homelessness had been, and David struggled with how to address it. Should he be honest? Would that hurt his chances? "Be truthful," Jennifer advised. "The right employer will see your resilience, not your mistakes. And honestly, the fact that you went through hell and came out learning new skills shows more determination than most people ever display." David applied to 12 jobs. He got rejected from 10 of them. One never responded. But the 12th, a small tech company that built websites for local businesses, called him in for an interview. The interview was the most nervous David had been in months. He borrowed a suit from the donation closet at Community Bridge, practiced his answers with Jennifer, and showed up 15 minutes early. The owner, a woman named Karen who couldn't have been older than 35, had kind eyes and a direct manner. She asked him about his background, his skills, and then gently about the gap in his resume. David had prepared for this. He took a breath and told her the truth. About the injury, about becoming homeless, about the program that helped him rebuild. He didn't make excuses or ask for sympathy. He just stated the facts. When he finished, Karen was quiet for a moment. Then she said something David didn't expect. "My uncle was homeless for 2 years. Addiction issues. He got clean, got help, and now he manages a restaurant downtown. Best employee they've ever had, they tell him." She looked at David directly. "I don't care where you've been. I care about where you're going. Can you start Monday?" David felt like his heart might burst. Yes, absolutely yes. The job started small. Basic website updates, fixing broken links, updating content. But David threw himself into it with everything he had. He arrived early, stayed late, asked questions, learned everything he could. 2 months into the job, Karen gave him his first real project. A local bakery needed a complete website overhaul. David worked on it for 3 weeks, perfecting every detail. When he presented it to the bakery owner, the woman actually teared up. "This is exactly what I wanted," she said. "This is going to help my business so much." That feeling, knowing his work mattered and helped someone, was better than any paycheck. Though the paycheck was nice too. For the first time in over a year, David had steady income. He saved every penny he could, planning for the day when he could move out of the transitional housing and into his own place. But he also did something else with that first paycheck. He donated $100 to Community Bridge. Jennifer tried to refuse it. "David, you should save that money for yourself." "You saved my life," he said simply. "This is the least I can do." Around this time, David's relationship with Lily started to deepen. The phone calls became regular every Sunday evening. Then video calls where David got to see his daughter's face, watch her laugh and roll her eyes at his dad jokes just like she used to. "Mom says maybe you could visit," Lily mentioned casually one Sunday, though David could hear the hope in her voice. His ex-wife had been cautious at first, protective of their daughter. But as months passed and David proved he was stable, she'd warmed to the idea of him being back in Lily's life. "I would love that," David said, his voice thick with emotion. More than anything, the visit happened 3 weeks later. David took the bus to the small town where his ex-wife had moved with Lily after the divorce. His hands shook the entire ride. When Lily opened the door, she just stood there for a moment, staring at him. She'd grown so much. She was taller now, her face less childlike and more mature. But her eyes were the same. Those same eyes that used to look at him like he hung the moon. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly. Then she hugged him. And David felt like every struggle, every hard moment, every painful step had been worth it just for this. His daughter in his arms, forgiving him. They spent the day together. Lily showed him her school, introduced him to her friends, took him to watch her volleyball game. David sat in the stands with other parents, cheering for his daughter, and felt a sense of belonging he'd thought was lost forever. That night, before he left to catch the bus back, Lily gave him something. It was a photo of the two of them from when she was little, maybe 6 years old. They were at the beach, both smiling at the camera, David holding her on his shoulders. "I kept this even when I was mad at you," she said. "I want you to have it now. To remember who you are, who we are." David kept that photo on his desk at work, a reminder of what mattered most. One Tuesday afternoon, David was working on a particularly tricky bit of code when someone knocked on the door of the office. He looked up to see Keanu standing there, hands in his pockets, that familiar smile on his face. "Heard you were working here now," Keanu said. "Thought I'd stop by and see how the job's going." They walked to a nearby coffee shop and David told him about everything. The job, the visits with Lily, the apartment he was saving for, the life he was building piece by piece. "I never got to really thank you," David said. "Not properly. You changed my life that night. You didn't have to stop, didn't have to care, but you did." Keanu shook his head. "You changed your own life, David. I just pointed you in a direction. You did the walking. I never would have known which direction to walk without you." They talked about Keanu's work, about movies and motorcycles and life, but they also talked about Community Bridge, about the other people being helped, about how the organization was growing. "We're helping about 50 people right now," Keanu said, "but we could help more. The need is so much bigger than our resources." An idea had been forming in David's mind for weeks now. He'd been afraid to voice it, afraid it was too ambitious. But sitting there with Keanu, he found the courage. What if there was a way to expand, to help more people? David asked. "I've been thinking about something. A fundraiser maybe, but different. Something that shows people what's possible. Real stories from real people." Keanu leaned forward, interested. "Tell me more." David explained his idea. An event where people who'd been helped by Community Bridge could share their stories. Not to make people feel sorry for them, but to show what human kindness and second chances could accomplish, to inspire others to donate, to volunteer, to care. "We could call it something like Bridges Built or Second Chances," David said, warming to the idea as he spoke. "Show that these aren't charity cases. These are people with skills and dreams and something to contribute. They just needed a hand up. Keanu was quiet for a moment, then smiled broadly. That's brilliant, David, seriously. Would you be willing to help organize it? Me? David said, surprised. You know what it's like on both sides now. You know what people need to hear. Will you do it? David thought about the man he'd been a year ago, sitting on that cold sidewalk with a cardboard sign. He thought about the man he was now, with a job and a daughter who talked to him again and hoped for tomorrow. He thought about all the people still sitting on sidewalks waiting for someone to see them. Yes, he said, I'll do it. Over the next month, David threw himself into planning the event alongside Jennifer and the Community Bridge team. He reached out to others in the program, asked them to share their stories. Some said yes immediately. Others needed more convincing. One evening, he sat with a man named Thomas who'd recently gotten off the streets after 3 years of homelessness. I don't know if I can stand up and talk about all that, Thomas said, his voice uncertain. It's embarrassing. What I was, where I've been? It's not embarrassing, David said gently. It's human. And your story might be exactly what someone needs to hear. Someone sitting on a street corner right now, thinking there's no way out. Your story could be their hope. Thomas looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do it. For them. As the event came together, David realized something. He wasn't just organizing a fundraiser. He was building a bridge of his own, connecting his past to his future, his pain to his purpose. Everything he'd been through had led him to this moment, to this chance to help others the way he'd been helped. The night before the event, David couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what he would say tomorrow. He'd volunteered to speak too, to share his story of meeting Keanu, of that phone call, of everything that came after. Finally, he got up and wrote down what he wanted to say. Not a speech exactly, just thoughts from his heart. When he finished, he read it over once and felt satisfied. These were his words, his truth. Tomorrow he would share them, and maybe, just maybe, they would matter to someone. The evening of the fundraiser arrived with clear skies and a golden sunset that painted the city in shades of amber and rose. The event was being held at a community center downtown, a space donated by a local business owner who'd been moved by Community Bridge's mission. David arrived 2 hours early, his stomach churning with nerves. He'd spoken to small groups before, but never anything like this. They were expecting over 200 people. Jennifer was already there, directing volunteers and checking on last-minute details. When she saw David, she smiled warmly. You ready for this? She asked. Not even a little bit, David admitted. Good. That means you care. You're going to do great. The room filled up slowly at first, then faster. David watched from backstage as people found seats, chatted with each other, read the programs that explained what Community Bridge did. He recognized some faces, people from the program, staff members. But most were strangers, people who'd heard about the event and wanted to learn more. Then Keanu arrived, slipping in through a side door to avoid causing a scene. He was dressed simply as always, and he came straight over to David. How are you feeling? He asked. Terrified, David said honestly. That's how I feel before every movie premiere, Keanu said with a grin. The nervousness means it matters to you. Use it. Let it fuel you. The event began with Jennifer welcoming everyone and explaining Community Bridge's mission. She talked about the statistics, the number of people they'd helped, the success rate of their program. But then she said something that made David's heart swell. Numbers are important, but stories are what change hearts. Tonight, you're going to hear from people who've lived these stories. They're not going to ask for your pity. They're going to show you what's possible when we choose to see each other's humanity. The first speaker was a woman named Rebecca, who'd been homeless with her 2 children after fleeing an abusive relationship. She spoke clearly and powerfully about the fear of those days, about sleeping in her car and rationing food so her kids could eat, about how Community Bridge had given her more than just housing. They'd given her the support to heal and the training to build a career. She was now a licensed practical nurse. My kids are thriving in school, Rebecca said, her voice strong. We have a home. We have safety. We have a future. That's what a second chance looks like. Thomas spoke next, the man David had convinced to participate. He talked about his 3 years on the streets, about the addiction that had cost him everything, about the day he decided he wanted to live instead of just survive. His voice shook at first but grew steadier as he spoke. "I'm 62 days sober," Thomas said, and the room erupted in applause. "I have a job at a warehouse, nothing fancy, but it's mine. I earned it. And every morning when I wake up in my apartment, I remember what it felt like to wake up on concrete, and I'm grateful, so grateful." Two more speakers shared their stories, each one different but connected by common threads: struggle, hope, help, and transformation. Then it was David's turn. He walked onto the small stage, his legs feeling like rubber. The lights were bright, making it hard to see individual faces in the crowd. Maybe that was better. "A little over a year ago," David began, his voice slightly hoarse, "I was sitting outside a convenience store on Sunset Boulevard. I was cold, hungry, and honestly, I'd pretty much given up on life getting any better. I had a cardboard sign and a backpack containing everything I owned in the world." He paused, remembering that night with perfect clarity. Then a man stopped. He didn't walk past me like hundreds of others had. He stopped, and then he did something I'll never forget. He sat down next to me on that cold, dirty sidewalk. He asked me if I'd eaten. He asked about my life. And he listened like my story actually mattered. David looked over to where Keanu sat near the side of the room. Their eyes met, and Keanu gave him an encouraging nod. That man was Keanu Reeves, and he's here tonight. But this isn't a story about a celebrity doing a good deed. This is a story about what happens when one person decides to see another person's humanity. Because what Keanu did that night wasn't just give me a business card. He gave me something I'd lost. He made me feel like I was still a person worth helping. David's voice grew stronger as he continued. "I made a phone call the next morning, terrified it wouldn't be real. But it was. Jennifer and the team at Community Bridge didn't just give me housing. They gave me a path. Medical care for my injury, job training, help reconnecting with my daughter who I hadn't spoken to in almost a year because I was too ashamed." He pulled out his phone and showed a photo on the screen behind him. It was from his recent visit with Lily, the two of them smiling at a volleyball game. "This is my daughter. She's 14 now, and we talk every week. She's even talking about visiting me for spring break. A year ago, I thought I'd lost her forever. Now I'm her dad again." David shared more about his journey, the job, the apartment he was saving for, the small donation he'd made back to Community Bridge from his first paycheck. He talked about the fear and the failures, the hard days and the victories. "I'm not standing up here to make you feel sorry for me," David said. "I'm standing here to show you that people can change, situations can improve, and sometimes all someone needs is a chance. Not a handout, a chance. Community Bridge gave me that chance, and I grabbed onto it with everything I had." He was nearing the end of his prepared remarks, but something made him go off script. He looked out at the crowd, at all those faces paying attention to his story. There are thousands of people in this city right now who are where I was a year ago, sitting on sidewalks, sleeping under bridges, wondering if tomorrow will be any different than today. They're not there because they're lazy or because they made bad choices. They're there because life broke them, and they don't know how to put the pieces back together. David's voice filled with emotion, but they can be put back together. I'm living proof. Everyone who spoke tonight is living proof. We just need more people to care, more people to help, more people to stop and sit down on the sidewalk instead of walking past." He paused, collecting himself. "So I'm asking you tonight not for money. Though donations are deeply appreciated, I'm asking you to see. See the homeless person on your street corner. See the struggling single parent. See the person dealing with addiction. See them as human beings who deserve a second chance. Because that's seeing, that recognition of shared humanity. That's where change begins." The room was silent for a moment when David finished. Then someone started clapping. Others joined in. Soon the entire room was on their feet, applauding. David stood there, overwhelmed, tears streaming down his face. After his speech, David mingled with the crowd. Person after person came up to thank him, to tell him his story had moved them, to ask how they could help. A woman pulled him aside and pressed a check into his hands. "This is for Community Bridge," she said. $5,000. "Because of your story. Because you made me see." A young man, maybe 25, approached David nervously. "I've been volunteering at a shelter," he said. "But hearing you tonight, I want to do more." "Do you think Community Bridge needs more volunteers?" "Always," David said, directing him to Jennifer. Throughout the evening, David watched as people signed up to volunteer, wrote checks, asked questions about how they could help. The event raised over $70,000, far exceeding their goal. But more than that, it changed hearts. David could see it in people's faces. The shift from sympathy to understanding, from pity to respect. Later, after most people had left, Keanu found David cleaning up. "Hell of a speech," Keanu said simply. "I just told the truth," David replied. "That's what made it powerful." Keanu helped David stack chairs. "You know, when I saw you that night outside the convenience store, I wasn't planning to stop. I was just going to get my coffee and leave. But something made me look at you, really look. And I saw myself. Not literally, but I saw a person who'd been dealt a hard hand. And I thought, what if someone had stopped for me when I was going through hard times?" David nodded slowly. "That's what I want people to understand. We're not that different, any of us. Just a few bad breaks separate someone with a home from someone without one." "Exactly," Keanu agreed. "And that's why this matters so much. Not just the fundraising, but the storytelling. You changed minds tonight, David. You opened eyes." Over the next few weeks, the impact of the event rippled outward. Local news covered the story. More donations came in. The volunteer list grew. Community Bridge was able to expand their services, helping 20 additional people get off the streets. But for David, the biggest change was internal. He realized he'd found his purpose. His job at the tech company was good, and he was grateful for it. But his real passion was helping others like him. He started volunteering at Community Bridge on weekends, mentoring new people in the program. He helped them navigate the same challenges he'd faced, offered encouragement when they wanted to give up, celebrated their victories no matter how small. One Saturday afternoon, David was working with a young guy named Anthony, who'd just entered the program. Anthony was angry, defensive, didn't want to accept help from anyone. "This is pointless," Anthony said. "Nothing's going to change." David recognized that anger. He'd felt it himself not so long ago. He pulled up a photo on his phone, the one from outside the convenience store that a bystander had taken and posted online. David had tracked it down months later. "See this guy?" David said, showing Anthony. "That's me. A year and a half ago. Homeless, hopeless, certain my life was over." Anthony looked at the photo, then at David in his clean clothes, healthy and whole. "That's really you?" "That's really me. And if I can go from that to this, so can you. But you have to take the first step. You have to decide you're worth saving." Something in Anthony's face shifted. Not a total transformation, but a crack in the armor, a glimmer of possibility. 3 months later, David got his own apartment. Not transitional housing, but his own place that he paid for with his own money. It was small, just a 1-bedroom, but it was his. He invited Lily to visit for spring break, and she came, sleeping on an air mattress in the living room, complaining about his lack of good snacks, being a normal teenager with her dad. They went to the beach one day, and David took a photo of them in almost the same pose as the old picture Lily had given him. When he looked at the two photos side by side later, he marveled at the journey. From broken to healing, from lost to found, from giving up to going forward. Jennifer called David one evening with news. Community Bridge wants to create a new position, peer support coordinator, someone who's been through the program and can help others navigate it. The board unanimously agreed you should be offered the job first. David didn't even have to think about it. Yes, absolutely yes. The new job meant leaving the tech company, taking a slight pay cut, stepping into the unknown. But it felt right in a way nothing else had. This was what he was meant to do. On his last day at the tech company, Karen pulled him aside.